Okay. All right. So here we go. Today's topic is going to be about cars. So we're going to start with a little exercise right here. This is a headline that I just pulled off of Fox News website this morning. I want you guys to read that headline below and tell me what you get from that headline. Anyone? Any thoughts on the headline? What message do you get from it? What vibe do you get from it? What's it telling you?
It's kind of saying that someone insulted someone and they killed somebody and then that caused more killings.
Right. Who do you think wrote this headline?
I don't know if Liberal City, if that's the name of a city, or if it's just a Republican saying it's a liberal city.
Right. So, uh, yeah, good point. Like you're not sure, is it a descriptor or is it an actual city or what, right? Lamisha, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna say like somebody who's obviously trying to get a lot of attention on this like article.
Right.
Um,
Big,
yeah.
bold words and, emotionally charged words. Right. So good, 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 good. Let's look at this one. Um, do you guys, I won't ask you guys, I just want you guys to take a look at the difference between these two headlines. So in the bottom here, this convicted felon is the second man to be arrested in the vandalism of the Metro Courthouse during Saturday's riots. And then this one, 25-year-old Wesley Somers was arrested on charges of felony arson, vandalism, and disorderly conduct. Between these two topics, what is the difference and what are the similarities that stand out to you guys? Christina, right. Convicted felon versus an actual name. That's a big one, right? How we're describing the person in that is in the story, right? Another thing I would point out, the second man versus 25-year-old, right? So even though they're kind of like similar, there's connotations to 25-year-old versus man, right? A man can be of any age, of any maturity, but a 25-year-old on the down low implies like, oh, they're not that much above a kid. So this is an example of the kind of bias that we can see on the regular. And the key point here is the word bias, right? This is what I want you guys to think about. Let's look at this one. So this is from the Washington Post. Anti-vaccine activists gather in DC, a city that mandates COVID vaccines, to protest mandates. Here's my question. Is there any bias in this headline? There's no right or wrong answer here. I just want to hear some
Yeah,
thoughts.
I would say no,
Why do you say no?
because it seems pretty factual. That doesn't seem like there's any hidden agenda. The only thing I could even think of is a city that mandates the COVID vaccines.
Mhm.
But uh I don't feel like I feel like that just adds information. It's
Right.
not super biased.
Awesome. You're talking about how it's mostly focused on information, and it doesn't seem like there's anything factually wrong with this, so seems good, right? Anyone
Yeah.
have an opposing opinion? Anyone think that this is biased? Okay, doesn't seem like it. I'm going to argue devil's advocate and say the fact that this man used the word activists rather than rioters or hooligans, unruly people,
Oh.
whatever, even though this is just a word, again, we have connotations. And notice one thing, that it's very hard to notice our own biases, right? I assume everybody here, pre-med, pre-health, whatever, kind of, oh man, what are these people talking about? Anti-vaccine, like why, right? so it's harder from our perspective to notice this kind of bias, whereas it's a lot easier to notice the bias when it's like, something as heinous as like racism or stuff like that, right? Like that stuff we can easily spot because we disagree with it so much, right? Here, the usage of activists is a very subtle form of bias, in my opinion, in that it can betray, like, even though you could argue that this is like a neutral bias, the author is purposely staying neutral and purposely not like inserting his opinion when he could have. And then finally, here is a scientific journal, a random scientific journal article. This thing I can't pronounce is effective and safe for ulcerative colitis through 2 years of maintenance therapy. Now, of course, here is where we see no bias, right? Because this is just scientific literature where they just talk about what they observed and the evidence behind it, right? Well, we see the word effective, right? But we're assuming, so something could be effective. So that could be a piece of bias unless they are supporting it with like evidence that proves that, objectively we see that it is effective. So in that sense, that's not to say that science is unbiased, right? Obviously, there's stuff like bias in, the reference group you compare to or the samples that you pick. But relatively, the point is that like compared to the everyday stuff that we see from headlines that we see in the news, science is a lot more dry. Okay, so what was the point of all this? The point of all this was to explain to you what CARS is actually testing you about. CARS is testing you about your ability to critically infer the author's identity from their writing. So it's not about the passage itself. This is like the first like big hurdle to wrap your head around. It's actually not about the passage. It's about the person behind the passage and how you can view them. And that's why I asked you to take a look at, to think about what kinds of people are writing these headlines, right? To go beyond the headline and go to the person. And this is very difficult for a lot of people because it's very different from how we normally read. If you think about the last time you cracked open a textbook or looked at a news article, we normally don't question the source of the information, right? Like if we go to a college class, we are kind of putting our faith in the instructor and in the textbook and saying, okay, I believe that this textbook is like well researched and well edited and that all the information in it is worth like absorbing. We don't go poking holes. Have you ever looked up like the author of your textbook? Unless it was your professor. I've never done that, right? And it's just like we just absorb it, right? CARS is a total opposite. They don't want you to just absorb information mindlessly. They want you to question. Okay? So how do we actually do that? How do we question the author and look beyond the passage? So this is a poster from a show I really like called Mindhunter, and it's about how the FBI initially like discovered or created the idea of serial killers and how they started profiling their psychology, not just the crime itself, to understand like what was motivating these people to do what they were doing, right? And we are kind of going to take a similar framework when we approach these passages, right? So criminal profilers use evidence to discover the psychology that drives a criminal. We're going to use the passage to discover the true opinions of the author. So imagine when I was sitting down to do CARS practice to keep myself like interested and to like emotionally engage. I was thinking like, okay, I'm a criminal profiler, right? And this is the only piece of evidence that I have linking me to the identity of the killer. And I need to create like a profile based on this piece of like writing that they wrote to figure out how they think and so that we can catch them. And that was like the frame of mind that I had that let me like go beyond the passage and try to think about the author themselves. So what does that actually look like? What are like some things in the passage? How can we identify a person from a passage? Think about word choice, like I just brought up before, like protesters versus activists, right? One has a slightly positive connotation, one has a slightly negative or neutral connotation. These things matter. And it's important to not just read and not think about the connotations. If I said, oh, I manipulated that part of the agreement versus I modified that part of the agreement, one of them sounds a lot worse than the other. And it may not be anything in truth, but in Carr's passages, that is very, very important for conveying the tone of the author. And we're going past if you take one thing away, you're going past what's on the paper and going towards the tone, the ideas, the intonation that the author is putting out. Another thing, I'm not sure what to actually call this, but I call this text architecture, because let's say the author is like rambling about, you know, I don't know, some random topic like school lunches in the 1950s or whatever, right? And he's rambling about this for like 2 paragraphs, and you're like, okay, maybe that's his point. In the 3rd paragraph, if he suddenly drops however or although, that signals to you that he's shifting gears. And that is something to like, pay attention to and be like, oh, okay, what is he talking about now? Because he's moving away from what he was talking about before. So it may not be what he was talking about was actually his idea. So so the whole goal is to discern the emotions and the attitudes of the author from the text. Any questions so far? Because this is like a very weird, we don't read this way. We never really think about the author, and maybe we probably should think about the author more when we do what we do. But this is going to be something new for most of you, I think, and especially people like us who I think they make this whole section just to kind of mess with pre-meds, because we are so used to reading scientific stuff and just like absorbing information that this is like a whole different ballgame. Okay, so any questions so far? Everything making sense? Okay, great. Let's continue. Okay, so now we're gonna dive into the nuts and bolts of how to actually study for this thing. Remember, I said earlier that you cannot, this is probably the hardest section to improve on because it's purely critical thinking. And you can't get any points just from studying the material like you can in other sections. In other sections, like if you don't know your material, you can just study and that's going to give you some points, right? But there's nothing to study here. There's only practice. There's no material that you're supposed to know on the car section. In fact, it's better to come in as like a blank slate, completely zen. You don't want to bring any of your own bias in. And that's why I brought up that Washington Post example. You want to be very, very careful about like inserting your own opinions. No, you're always working from the position of the author. You have to almost become them, or at least know them really well. So, okay, so this slide, so here we're going to talk about what sources should you use to prep for cars. First off, the AMC material is, the holy grail of the material. That's the one that is the best because they make the test. So why would you not use that, right? Obviously. Khan Academy material was made in conjunction with the AMC. And from my own experience, the Khan Academy material is pretty good. The passages are a decent length. There's a decent variety of topics. And the questions are very similar in nature to the real stuff. So I think Khan Academy is right after AMC. UWorld has a bunch of questions as well. I think that they do a decent job of emulating, but you can tell it's still emulation. Like there were some questions where I was like, I disagree. Like once you really tap into the logic that they want you to use, you can tell when it's off. And that's extremely difficult for me to explain because it's just like, you would just have to know what it is. So what I'm saying is that anything that was made aside from the AMC is a third-party thing, and they are simulating, they're emulating, they're not creating it, right? They're just trying to copy it. And obviously, anytime you're copying, there can be mistakes or problems. So I would say that since a lot of you are like, just in April, I would say dive into the like don't save it for the last minute. The AMC material and the Khan Academy material, you should do it. Probably Khan first and then AMC. Also, don't worry about like, oh, but what if I run out of material? Just redo it, because that's going to be better practice for you. I think I redid the AMC stuff twice, and it was super helpful because I could see where I had grown and how my thought like patterns had changed compared to the first time. Okay. I will come back to this part. The using the Jack Weston site. Now let's talk about what kind of questions that you can get in a typical CARS passage. So comprehension is the first. There's 3 different types. The first type is a comprehension question, and this is the simplest type. And this is directly taken from them. It wants you to examine relationships among paragraphs to identify the central themes and ideas. So my paraphrasing of this is a level 1 question where they're trying to figure out, did you understand the author's argument as they presented it, as in from their point of view? And the types of questions that you might get on this is like, what is the main idea of the passage? Or what's the author's stance on whatever the passage was about? These are very simple. Like you would think they're very simple, but they can be a little bit tricky. But in terms, relatively speaking, these are the simplest kinds of questions that you can get because they're not asking you to manipulate any of the information. They're just saying, did you get this information? And I'm not saying that this is always easy. I'm just saying that this is relatively the simplest kind of question that you can get. You're supposed to read the passage and then understand what the author was trying to tell you. Any questions on comprehension? Okay, all good. Then we have reasoning within the text. And this is the big one. I think that this is probably the hardest category because this encompasses most of what they want you to do. And so let's just read through this. Reasoning within the test question, which means that it wants you to explore the key assumptions, claims, or theme that is being expressed in a passage. You will have to evaluate the soundness of an argument, the reasonableness of its conclusions, and or the appropriateness of its generalizations. It is crucial to carefully examine the strengths and weaknesses of the key ideas based on the information given. So, to sum that all up, my one sentence summary of it is a level 2 question. Did you understand the author's argument well enough to evaluate? So notice the difference here. Before it was just, did you understand it? Did you just understand it? Like, did you understand what they were saying? But here, did you understand it well enough that you can engage with it, that you can debate it, that you can question it? That's different, right? Like plenty of us, just think about like every day when we study things, right? Like if we're studying some high level biology concept, right? Like maybe we learned all about cell biology, all the organelles. But can we like go and talk to the person that wrote the book and like argue on their level? Probably not, because we don't understand it to that degree. These passages are designed in such a way that you should be able to engage on that level. So for example, a question that you might get is, which of these sentences is unrelated to the author's argument? This is more complex than just get rid of this first part. Which of these sentences represents the author's argument? That would be like a regular comprehension question. But this one is saying, which of these is unrelated? So you're evaluating multiple things. You're not only are you evaluating what is the author's argument, you're now also evaluating, well, what isn't the author's argument, which is a step further. And that's why this is a level 2 reasoning within the text. Another option would be, which of these quotes does the author use to support their claim? So again, so obviously the answer choices here would be 3 options that don't support and 1 option that does. So again, you're seeing the pattern of comparing, what is and what isn't what the author is putting forth. Like, do I understand it well enough, his argument, to do that? So this is a huge, I have no stats to back this up, but I feel like this is the kind of question that you get most often. Yeah, okay. So, any questions on reasoning within the text? Okay, moving on to the last one then. This is reasoning beyond the text. Okay, so reasoning beyond the text means it wants you to either apply or extrapolate the ideas in the passage to new situations, or to assess how new information would impact the ideas presented in the passage. It is important to understand the assumptions underlying the article and how new information may or may not shift the central thesis. So now we're moving even another step further. Before it was, do you understand the author's argument well? Then is, do you understand it well enough to evaluate it? Now, do you understand the author's argument well enough to predict their response to novel information that wasn't already discussed? So what does that mean? That means that a question would typically give you it's very easy to identify reasoning beyond the text questions because they will always give you some new information that wasn't in the text. So for example, if a passage was talking about books, like an author was saying, oh, books are super valuable, we love books culturally, they're very important, blah, blah, and then the question asked, what do you think the author would think about movies? This is reasoning beyond the text because it's diving into somewhat related, but not exactly in the text. That's a different style of question. So here are some examples. Which position would the author most disagree with? And the positions would be like different positions that weren't discussed in the text. And then you would see something like, which new scenario best supports the author's position, which is the example that I just gave you with the books and the movies. So these require a good, obviously everything builds on each other. If you don't, if you miss at the comprehension level, there's no way you can comprehend beyond, you know? So everything builds off of each other. Okay. So this is how I practiced and how I improved at this section. What I did was I had a giant Google Doc of every single, I basically made a journal, right? A journal. At the beginning, so when I sat down, every day I did like, I think I did 2 passages every day. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. Like in the morning, I just made it a regular habit to get used to it. And so what I did was, first of all, just do the passage normally. So go to the passage as you normally would, pretend like you're taking a test, right? Go through the passage, and at the end, you just track how long it took you to do it, right? Because timing is also a big issue in this stuff, right? A lot of people have trouble, like, oh, I'm reading too slowly, I need to read faster, this kind of stuff, right? This is a pretty tricky topic because everybody processes information differently, and there's not really, it's hard to say like, oh, you need to get it done, the reading in like 5 minutes or like 7 minutes or whatever, right? I think it's very unique to different people. And that's something that you have to just track on your own and see like, am I comfortable with the amount of time that I'm spending on my passage and the amount of time I'm spending on the questions? For example, I've had passages where I was super confused and I was like, okay, I spent 6 minutes reading the passage to truly understand it, but then I answered all the questions in like 3 minutes. So that was a good time, right? But then I've had other situations where I breezed through the passage in like 3 minutes and I was like, okay, this is easy. And the questions were super hard and took me like 6 minutes. So it's really about finding the nice balance for yourself with timing. And the only way that you can do that is if you track how long it takes you to do those things. So tracking how much time it takes you to do those passages will tell you like how to tweak it and what you need to work on there. Okay, so step 2. After you have finished answering the passage, right? You're done with it. You don't check the answers. You don't check the answers yet. This is what you need to do now is check your own understanding of the passage. So what you're going to do is write down a simple main idea for the passage. And when I say simple, I mean simple. I mean bold, like bold, simple. It needs to be like 1 sentence, 2 at the most. The reason is that when you're evaluating questions, you want to have that main idea in your head, and it's got to be simple, and it's got to be something that you can really use on every question. Be like, okay, this answer is obviously wrong because the main idea is X, right? It can't be muddled. It has to be very clear to you what the main idea is. And you have to write this down because when you reveal your answer choices or whatever, you can compare it. And that's where the real studying and the real improvement comes. When you compare what you've written down to what's actually on the screen, that lets you know, oh, I'm on the right track or I'm on the wrong track. One thing that is, I think that this section is very difficult because we, as humans, we have a lot of biases that, like, protect our ego and stuff. If you're studying for your PS section, then you've probably seen these. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of like not writing down your main idea and then looking at what the answer is and be like, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking something like that, and then just moving on. This is very bad because then you don't get then you rob yourself of the opportunity to practice. And it's not even your own fault. It's like, you might genuinely feel that way. So that's why writing it down is the only way to truly check yourself, to truly be like, oh, that's not what I thought it was. I need to reread this and like see if I can get to that understanding. And that, what I'm describing, is exactly what we're going to do for each question. Because in each question, after, you're not going to, so just to be clear, you're not doing this, go through your answers and write down why you chose it and why you eliminated the other options. You're not doing this while you're taking it. When you're taking it, you're pretending as if you're taking a real passage in a real test, right? And you wouldn't do this on the real test. This is just for practice. In the test, you would probably just do this in your head, right? But what I'm saying is, after you did it in your head, you write it down so that you can actually compare it to what the actual answer choices are. And this is going to help you a lot because not only are you saying, well, I think that this is the answer, it also forces you to say that these other answers are wrong. And this is so valuable because if you convince yourself that the right answer is wrong and you have to justify it, then you can clearly see, oh, I've made a huge error here because I wrote all of this justification that was totally wrong according to their logic. So that gives you a very like clear section of oh, I messed up here. I messed up here. And that's what you do. You check your answers and you compare your logic to theirs. How does that actually help you? In that you can follow, because these questions always have like little explanations of why that is why that's the answer, and why the answer that you chose, if you chose a wrong answer, why that one is wrong. So by going through that, you'll be able to pick up on certain things that help you to not make those mistakes again in the future, ideally, right? And the last thing to do is to track the style of questions that you're getting wrong. And the AMC stuff and the Khan Academy stuff tell you this. They straight up tell you this is a comprehension question. This is a reasoning within the text question, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can see that, oh, I'm getting a lot of reasoning beyond questions wrong, then you can start reevaluating your approach to those questions. And that kind of focused, like putting the focus on your weak points is how you see the greatest improvement. You don't want to just practice these blindly. You don't want to just just doing the passage itself would probably take you like anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes, right? But this whole process is very like intensive and should take you like another 10 minutes, because this is where you're actually improving and seeing the improvement. Just taking the test is just to get to this point, if you ask me. Just doing the actual cars passage is not practice. Think about that. Doing the actual cars passage is not practice, because if you're just doing mistakes, then that doesn't help you. What really helps you is improving on those mistakes. So that's how I improved on cars. is that my last slide? Yeah, I think that is my last slide. I wanted to keep a lot of space open for us to actually put this into practice, for us to actually do some cars practice and go through and really try to put this into motion and everything. So let's see here. Let me pull something up. Okay, I also, any questions in the meantime? Or any comments or anything?
So you said it was reasoning within the text, reasoning beyond the text, and what was the third one? The CMP?
So CMP is comprehension. So that's actually the first one.
Copy.
Yeah. Oh, I will put this in the let me go ahead and put this in the thing so you guys can see the slides. Do, 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 do. Did everybody, is that link working that I sent that has like the previous that has the previous slides in it? Did anybody try it?
Yeah, so I can see the 16th. In fact, reporting the 16th
I just put it
and on the
in.
9th.
I just try refreshing, see if it's there now.
Yep, I could see it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so those are the three types of questions. Now, what did I want to do? I wanted to, right, so let's do this. How do you guys feel about this section in general?
Bad at it.
Bad at it?
Yes, sir.
I think a lot of science people are kind of like shocked by this section. Does anybody feel good about it? I'm curious.
So for me, it's like depending on the passage. I sometimes I wrote in the chat it's like a hit or miss. So sometimes like when I practice, I'll get all of them correct or like most of them correct. And then on the next section, I'll probably get like one correct. It really depends on how engaged I am in the passage, I feel like.
I see. Yeah, that's really interesting. Oh, how engaged you are in the passage. Ah, I see. Yeah, you can definitely, oh man, during my real MCAT, like I actually almost fell asleep during the car section. I'm not sure what happened. I think it was because I had a sandwich right before it and I was just like tired all of a sudden. And I fell asleep during a passage about like Native American like quilt weaving. And I was like, whoa, what's going? I gotta like I kind of slapped myself awake and I kept going through the thing. It was crazy. Do people wake you up? No, I didn't. I was like, I didn't fall asleep straight up, but I was like I was like, whoa, like I need to get my head back in the game. I wonder, do people wake you up? I have no idea. That would be crazy. You could just sleep through the MCAT section. Oh man. Um, let's see here. Okay, so let's go to Khan Academy. Okay, how to stream this?
Just in case, another issue I had is that I know we went over one of the examples was social loafing, where people get lazy with more people. Sometimes I know the definition for the word that they're talking about, but I don't even I look at the phrase on my blah. What's it even talking about? So I think that's another thing for me, like understanding the use of the vocabulary.
You're wait, can you clarify that? Like you're saying you know the thing, but and then what's the problem?
Yeah, like I still don't understand what the question is asking. Like I think a specific one was cognitive dissonance,
Hmm.
and I was like,
Oh, I
yeah,
see. Like you,
yeah.
okay, so that's probably a sign that like you think you know it, but you don't actually know it.
Okay.
That's what I would say to that, because it's often that um you feel like you know how the difference between like being able to recognize something versus being able to like recall something, like it's two levels of like how much you know something. Like if I ask you a question, you'd be like, what is that thing? What is like easy example, short answer questions are much harder to answer. Short answer questions are much harder than multiple choice questions, because multiple choice questions are just you just recognize something and you pull it up, right? So
Mhm.
you might have the ability to recognize cognitive dissonance and understand it with like in a context, but you may not know it well enough to actually like, you know, think about it the way that they want you to think about
Okay. Okay.
it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome. So what we're going to do now is we are going to do some cars. Um, so let me explain this. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is you probably oh, let me pull up the link. Where was it? Here. Yes. So this is copy link. Okay, so I'm gonna drop it in the chat. So this is a cool little thing. It's just aesthetic, but basically the Khan Academy questions are also on this website, and this website puts them into the actual MCAT form. So it looks like the MCAT. And the important thing, the reason that I really like using this for cars is because in the Khan Academy website, once you select an answer, you can't move on until you've checked it. And we don't want to do that here because that's not that's not how the actual test works. The actual test, you just click it and you go, right? So here you can click and you go. And getting used to the actual format of the test was comforting to me anyway, because I felt like, like, hey, it's not different from what I've been doing all this time, right? So I really like this website for that. You do have to sign up, but it's like it doesn't cost anything. You just have to put your email in and whatever to see the solution. I think you have to sign up to see the solution here. But it's just the same material that is on Khan Academy's website. It's just a different format that you may prefer or may not prefer. Okay, so what I want to do now is go through this with you guys. So I would like to do this as as similarly to like a real thing as possible. So okay, so it's 5:46 now. Do you guys want to go through this now and then take a break, or do you want to take a break now and then come back to do it?
Can you say it again, please?
Sorry. I was saying, would you guys like to take a break now, and, or would you like to take the break after we do this? After we do one passage?
I have no preference.
No preference? It's okay. It seems like okay. Then we'll just do it now, and then we'll take a break at around 6. Okay. So what I want everybody to do is to open up this passage. So I think probably just give it to you right here. Da, da, da. And if that one doesn't work, then no, actually no, do that one because it won't because then you won't have to see the answers.
Yeah, work.
Okay, cool. So I want everybody right now it's 5:47. I want everybody to take until 5:55, I guess, to just read through the passage. And then we're going to work through the questions together. Okay? So let's just read through the passage now, and at 5:55 I'll come back and we'll go through it together, okay? If you have any random questions or anything, you can just post it in the chat. Okay, guys, does anyone need more time? Uh, okay, I believe that everybody's finished. Does anyone want to talk about how they felt about this passage, or anything, any comments or questions or anything? Did everybody read the passage?
Yeah, at first I thought it was going to be more like a social commentary, but then towards the end, when the author started talking about Steven Spielberg's films, I'm like, is this more of a film, something more about films?
Mhm.
So just the main topic of the passage just became a little bit less clear to me.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I see a lot of people saying that they don't want to contaminate the well of interpretation, I guess. Okay, so let's see, what is the best way to go about this? Um, okay, then the best way to go about this, then let's without so that we don't contaminate everybody. I'll give you a minute, so I'm not putting you on the spot. Take a minute to just think of one sentence. If you had to think of one sentence, what is the main idea? So take a minute, think about one sentence, and then when I tell you to, just post that sentence in the chat. So nobody's going to be influencing anybody else. We'll just post it and then we'll go through that, okay? So you don't have to post it until I tell you. Just think about it for a moment and then so the question is, what is the main idea of this passage?
Are we just saying what we think the main idea is, or are we copying a sentence?
We're typing no, you're going to type a sentence in your own
Okay.
words. What is the main idea? And then everybody will post in chat so that nobody's like, talking over anybody else. And I think that's the most fair way to do it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, if you're ready, you can start dropping your one sentence main idea in the chat. Awesome. I like what I'm seeing. Does anyone feel like they still want to go, or do do you not want to, like, I'm totally okay if nobody wants to put their main idea out. I just want to make sure I'm not cutting anybody off. So, okay, great. Still have some coming in. I'll give it a little bit more time if anybody else wants to get it out there, and then we'll start discussing. Okay, so thank you guys for answering. Let's go through this. I think this is a very interesting exercise, and you might observe that this is we're basically right now we're going through the steps that I had outlined earlier of how to practice, right? We finished. Oh, actually, we didn't finish answering the questions, but that's okay because right now we're just working through it. Right now, we're writing down a simple main idea of what we think this passage is talking about, right? It's a very dry, very weird passage. So let's look at some of the things that people have said. Right away, one that jumps out to me is two people said almost the exact same thing. Rationalization of society leads to irrationality, and the rationalities and irrationalities of society, right? These are what the main meat of the passage, right? And then Andrew said, society aims for efficiency, for it ends up giving many errors and making the world mundane. Okay, the main idea is that rational models, as seen in fast food industry, are now being incorporated in everyday life. Good. We repeat the same tasks and that drives us crazy. Okay. The good thing here is that everybody was kind of able to understand what the passage is actually about. But what did I say at the beginning Cars was actually about?
Understanding the position of the author.
Understanding the position of the author. Everybody has given a main idea of the passage, which is fair. That's what I asked for. But what we really want to get at is what is the main idea of the author, as in an actual idea that this man has, right? What is his actual idea? And his actual idea is along the lines of what you guys are saying, but it's not including his tone, his opinion, his, does he feel good about it, bad about it, etc. Christina says people fall into conformity of a rational model. I think that's a little bit closer to the kind of vibe that he's putting out, for lack of a better word. Because this guy, do you think he's happy or is he sad about this rationality? Right? Like, does he approve of it or does he disapprove of it? These are the kind, he doesn't like it, right? This is the kind of thing that you want to put into your main idea. This is the kind of thing that will actually help you answer these questions. Opinions, right? And this is why it's very difficult, because when we do stuff like this normally, what you guys put as main idea answers is correct for normal, like SAT level questions or whatever. But here we really want to get at, well, what does the author feel about the main idea, right? So I think a complete main idea, if I were to give it, would be something like the author's disapproval of the increased like commodification of society, or rather than commodification, increased rationalization of society, right? That includes all of the elements that will help you always like keep track of who the author is and what he believes about the main passage. That is what you need. Two elements, not just the main idea. What does the author feel about the main idea? That is very, very key. So I think that is super helpful to you guys in understanding how just from the very beginning, like you can already get messed up if you're not in the right framework. So what we're going to do right now is work through some of these problems. And I think a good way to work through these problems would be, remember the way that I said was like, we go through the answers and we write down why we choose it and why we eliminate. So what I'm going to do is ask people to look at each choice, and then I'll ask you guys, can you give me a reason why you think that this is correct or incorrect? Okay. It doesn't have to be super out there, and if you guys don't want to answer, just say pass or something like that, or ask me if I can do it instead. No problem. I just want you guys to be engaged, and like you get the most out of practice if you try it yourself. So let's do this. Question 1. The author's argument suggests that the primary motive of employers who make humans work with machines is to. So right away, like if I was doing this for real, I would be like, okay, what is this actually asking about? Employers who make humans work with machines. So which part of the passage was that in? When he was talking about the fast food stuff, right? So we would go to the fast food and we'll try to find what he's talking about. Okay, adolescent help, because this age group adjusts more easily than adults due to surrendering their autonomy to machines, rules, and procedures, right? Already we have like, so we were able to like link the question to the relevant part of the passage, right? And we get the idea of the author's tone, surrendering their autonomy. Wow, that's harsh language. He's saying like they're becoming slaves to machines, right? Like he clearly does not like it. So that gives us an idea of like where the author is coming from, right? So first option, the author's argument suggests that the primary motive of employers who make humans work with machines is to improve the quality of their products. Would anybody like to comment on why this is right or wrong?
I think it's wrong because nowhere in the passage do they say about improving quality. And it seems like the message of the passage is, I don't want to like go through the answer if the other question is, but it's definitely not to produce the best product, it's to produce an efficient product. So I don't think quality is what they're concerned about.
Awesome, 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 well-reasoned explanation. There were two things that you did there that were great. The first thing that you did was you said there's nothing in the passage that supports this. Absence of evidence is very, very important here, because they will freely throw random stuff at you and you'll be like, wait, did they talk about this at all? And the problem is a lot of this stuff feels like they talked about it, especially when you're like slogging through passages after passage, right? It's very easy to contaminate the idea of like efficient stuff means low quality stuff, right? But if you really look through it, the man doesn't actually say that. He just says they're kind of samey. Everything's similar. Everything's like not unique. But he doesn't go so far as to say that that means that it's bad quality. And that's why I say you really have to come into these passages as zen as possible, as blank as possible, because the connection of, oh, well, quality, efficiency, oh, they probably don't go together. You have to be able to look at things in a very disconnected way. And so that was very good that you noticed that like we didn't actually talk about this, so we can't make a comment based on that. Good. So I think we're saying that A is incorrect based off of that. B, reduce the cost of wages and benefits. Anybody else want to talk about this one? Oh,
So
how
I
did
could
you,
answer on this one.
go ahead. Wait, how did you do that? How did you do that little red mark?
I went to annotations.
Oh, cool. Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Okay, we'll definitely use that. Awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so to answer on that, this was actually one of the ones that I was thinking about
Mhm.
because of where it said like more expensive developments, like they don't want to really make things more expensive.
Mhm.
But I don't think I think there's another answer that's more strongly supported than this one. And
Great.
like
Yes.
the thing about benefits, I didn't really hear anything about that. Maybe wage, but I don't feel like it's the strongest between these. So I mean, I could probably talk more on the one that everyone would pick, but I don't feel like it's the most strongly supported one, and I don't think that the wages are so important towards the actual purpose of what the author is trying to get across.
Very, very good. So okay, awesome. Is there any way that you can undo the annotation?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
How do you do that, or how do I do that?
Well, you could actually clear all the
Oh, I see.
annotations. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So the reason I asked that was just to show you guys, I had a slide on this, but for some reason I don't see it now, so I forgot to explain it to you. But what you're getting at is very, very important. Do you want to just jump to what you think is the answer so I can explain what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I want to say it's D, the
Right.
final one.
And why do you think it's D?
Because throughout the whole passage, it talks about efficiency. Usually when I think of efficiency, I'm thinking the minimum to get things pumped out. And they're talking about machines and surrendering autonomy or something like that.
Mhm,
So machines are gonna make things as uniform as possible. And the whole mantra of the whole passage is to make things as efficient as possible, and that brings uniformity. So since I see the word uniformity, I'm immediately drawn towards D above all the other ones.
Awesome. So that's a pretty good explanation. What I wanted to get at here was the process of how you arrived at this answer, right? So you said A doesn't look right because there's a lack of evidence, right? So we got rid of A. Draw. Yeah, let me see if I can do this. Yes, we got rid of A because there wasn't anything about quality. And then we got rid of, and then C we didn't even talk about. Avoid seeming to be behind the times. Again, nobody ever talked about this. Like employers never mentioned that, like, oh, they're worried about like their reputation or whatever, right? So this wasn't talked about. Again, these two, notice here, what do these two answers have in common? They contradict. They straight up are just not supported by the passage, right? Then these two are different. They don't straight up contradict with the passage. Instead, they're kind of similar. Notice how Andrew picked up that, we did talk about wages, but did we talk about benefits? It's like, so a very common pattern with these questions is you get two options that are bad. Like bad in the sense that like you can easily disqualify them as options if you take a look and compare it to the passage. So two of the options are easy to eliminate. And then it's a tricky choice between the last two. The reason it's a tricky choice is because one of them seems good, but just has something slightly wrong with it. And this is the hardest part. Like getting rid of the two is easy. And then you get to the 50-50, and that's the hard part. Being able to discern the 50-50 is where you're going to have to practice the most and improve the most at. And the reason that D is the best option is because it flows the best with the overall main idea that we picked. And that's how you always check your answer. When you pick your answer, you're like, okay, take a step back. Does this flow with the main idea? Because the answer always has to flow with the main idea. If it doesn't flow with the main idea, you're like, okay, this is actually incorrect. And the reason that B is tricky is because the author's argument suggests that the primary motive of employers who make humans work with machines is to reduce the cost of wages and benefits. Well, that sounds like it kind of flows with the idea because, corporations are like money hungry but then the problem is that the author's main idea or your own perception of the main idea? And that's where it gets tricky. You have to catch yourself and see, well, the author himself didn't actually talk about, corporations reducing the cost of wages and benefits. And he definitely didn't say that that was their primary motivation. Even though in real life, that might be their primary motivation, it's very, very important that you only go based off what the passage is telling you. Okay, so sorry for rambling so long, just on one question. Anybody have any questions on how we did all of that and how we got through that?
Yeah, I had a question.
Mhm.
So I know how you narrated it, like, and I know it's kind of contradictory because I eliminated A first,
Mhm.
but I feel like for me, like normally, it would be a toss up between A, B, and D, and because I feel like with A, if they changed it to conserve the quality of their products, I feel like that would have been the best answer. But well, I feel like it would have been equal between A and D. And I'm like, so would it be B since A and D are the same things? And I feel like that's usually what I see. That's probably not what's actually there, but
So
that's usually what I think I see. You know what I mean?
so you're saying that, like, let's say A was conserve the quality of their products versus increase the uniformity of the procedures, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, if it was like if instead of improve it said like maintain or conserve.
Maintain or conserve the quality of the products versus increase the uniformity of the procedure, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. How does conserve the quality of the products flow with the main idea? What is the main idea? Is the main idea about the quality or about the uniformity?
Good
Is he
point. Good point. It
is
is
he
the
talking
uniformity.
he's talking about the process. He's talking about the systems. The products are an afterthought, right? The whole initial part is talking about rational systems spawning a
Mm.
series of irrationality. So that is a great example of that main idea check. That's why the main idea is so important, and understanding the author's conception of the main idea, because it can always center you. It can always bring you back. You're getting lost between all these answer choices. You're just like, what is going on? Okay, let me just compare it. Does it flow with the main idea? That was a question I would ask myself at the end of every single question. Does this choice that I picked flow? And if it flows, then you can feel confident that you came to the right answer and you move. Okay, good question.
Okay, yeah.
Any
Yeah,
other
thank you.
questions? Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Is anybody confused? If anybody's confused, I really want you to speak up so I can help you like talk through the confusion.
I have a question more about the technique of how to, because I've heard conflicting advice on how to approach these questions. I've heard read the question first before you read the passage, and then I also heard that's a waste of time. Read the passage first. So I'm not sure. What do you recommend?
That is a great question. I tried both. When I started out, I also heard the conflicting suggestions. So I tried both and I wanted to see what worked for me. Because I developed the style of looking at, I realized that I think it works. Okay. I think reading the questions first could work for somebody who has a very difficult time spotting elements, the relevant elements of the question. So what I mean by that is when I looked at this and I said the author's argument suggests that the primary motive of employers who make humans work with machines. In 5 seconds, I understood, okay, humans work with machines must connect to the part about fast food, because that's where they were talking about humans working with machines. The other part with the home stuff doesn't talk about that. Instead, it talks about how like, the homes are like more uniform. So for me, I was able to do that. I don't know if everybody is able to do that, just because I don't know if everybody, like, I can't know beyond my own ability. So I feel like if somebody has trouble connecting the question to the passage, then it may help them to kind of prime themselves by looking at the questions first and then be hunting. However, it could also distract you from the main idea. So my personal method is to go through and focus on understanding the passage and understanding the main idea, because I know that if I put in the real work to understand the passage, that when I look at the questions, it won't be hard for me to go back and find it. So that's just my personal recommendation. I don't know if for other people, they need to read the questions first. Yeah, so Andrew says something good. If I read the questions first, it gives me an agenda of what to look for and makes me end up taking more time. That could be the case for some people. It could also be the case that it helps people and it makes them faster. I really don't know. I really think it's a very personal choice depending on how you think. My understanding, if you ask me for my recommendation, how I think you should work towards, I think you should read the passage first, because the main idea will guide you to everything. And I do believe that reading the passage first was the right way to go. Is the right way to go for most people, I would say. That's how I would couch that statement. Yeah. Did you try it both ways? Did you have any preference for either way?
Yeah, I noticed that too. That when I read the question first, I spend more time in actually looking for the answer in the passage, and it takes me more time than would have taken me probably if I just read the passage first. So I think that works for me too. I was just wondering because I just want to make sure just want to hear what like people do, and maybe there's like a better technique. But I think reading the passage
Yeah,
is
awesome.
works for me. Yeah. So thank you.
No, thank you for asking. That's a great question. definitely something I should have covered in the presentation. The other thing that I just wanted to quickly mention is that I really should have talked about this in the presentation. I've gotten to the point, the problem is that because I did this for so long, I forgot all of the beginner traps that I fell into. So I really, it will help me a lot too if you guys like talk about like the beginner struggles that you guys are having so that I can remember them. Because what you just talked about reminded me of another beginner issue that I had. When you try to answer these questions, the answer is not in the passage. This is something that is very strange. Unlike, you know, SAT style questions or whatever regular ELA questions, you will not see the words increase the uniformity of procedures verbatim in this passage anywhere. That's not how this works. Because you are not looking for the answer in the passage. You are looking for the answer that best matches your own internal idea of the main idea. So if I had to like it's like if you read if you read the passage and then in your brain you make an idea and then you use that idea to answer the questions. The other way of trying to find the answers in the passage directly does not work here because the answers are not directly in the passage. The answers are found by creating a main idea, and they are testing you on that created main idea all of the time. They are never, ever, ever asking you to pull anything verbatim from the text. They are never doing that. So that's why it also helps you. That's why I encourage you guys when we were doing the main ideas, I was saying, tell me a little bit about the author's intentions. Tell me a little bit about his tone, because that stuff is not verbatim in the passage. You have to, that's where you're doing the critical thinking. That's why this is the critical thinking section. That is the legwork that you have to put in. So that is a beginner trap again. You don't look at the passage as you're creating the answer for yourself almost in a way, which is very new, can be a little bit like weird at first, and that's why I recommend that journal, because you can write everything out and see what you're doing well at and what you're not doing well at. Okay, so we spent quite a bit of time on question one. Does anyone else have any questions about this? Let's take a look at the solution and see. Now that I think about it, surrender autonomy was a keyword to signal uniformity. Yes, yeah. So yeah, the word choice is super super relevant all the time. No, it's okay. I understand what you're saying. So we'll take a look at the solution here, and yes. So you can see, that's fine. So in Khan Academy, right? So they tell you, hey, what style of question is this? Foundation of comprehension. Can anybody tell me why this is a foundation of comprehension question? No, nobody. Okay, I'll explain it. So the comprehension thing, let me just read off the slide, means that it wants you to examine relationships among paragraphs to identify sentences, blah, blah. We don't need to know all that. Just keep it in your head, like your own like personal understanding of the comprehension is, do I understand the main idea? So why is this question checking your understanding of the main idea? Because the answer itself is like the main idea. It's about uniformity, right? And so here in paragraph 2, the author uses the fast food industry. Again, this is how you can also check yourself. Did I go to the right part of the passage? Was I able to understand what part of the passage they wanted me to look at, right? To exemplify an organization using the rational model, to prefer the fastest means of getting blah, 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 whatever, whatever. We are just getting to the explanation for D. Obviously, if you're doing this yourself, you would want to make sure that, you know, the reason why we eliminate A, B, C is consistent with what we said, right? Notice how we said, where D. In the second paragraph, the author cites a desire to avoid surprises for the consumer. In the third paragraph, the author cites employer preference to hire employees that are comfortable with surrendering their autonomy to machines, rules, and procedures. This is consistent with the claim that the employer has uniformity of procedures as a goal. So notice how there is not, what are they picking up on support? They're picking up predictability, control through technology, surrendering their autonomy, right? None of these things are verbatim this word, uniformity of procedures. They're all just kind of similar. They're all kind of feeding into the idea. That's why creating your main idea, a strong, correct main idea, is a first step. If you don't get there, if you can't formulate the main idea correctly, you're screwed. You're just screwed. There's no other way to put it. And that's why writing down the main idea is almost more important than answering the questions. Writing down the main idea and correctly comparing it and understanding, getting to the point where you can always correctly get the main idea is where you can make the biggest improvement. Okay, yeah. Any questions? Okay, then let's move on to the next question. How do I get rid of clear? Clear all drawings? Yes, okay. Alrighty. Would anybody like to, oh wait, no, I just pulled this up. I'm dumb. Sorry. So take a look at this question here, and then yeah, I'll give you guys a few minutes to think about it. Actually, wait, do you guys want to take a break right now? Or do you want to just keep going?
I have no preference.
Andrew, I have no preference. You don't mind keep going? Okay. All right. If anybody wants to take a break, let me know. But if nobody wants to take a break, then we'll just keep going. It's me. All right. Then we will just keep going. All good. So a common thread. Okay. Would you? Okay. Do you guys want me to read through this and like answer it myself, or do you guys want some time to try it on your own? Answer it myself? Okay. You want to see the process? Okay, sure. Sure. Let's do that. Okay, a common thread in the discussion of fast food and the discussion of suburban housing is that people today. So right away, before I even look at the choices, I know that they're talking about two separate paragraphs, right? So this is kind of going to be a synthesis of the whole thing, because he's talking about fast food, and he's also talking about the housing stuff later on, right? And then so they're saying, what is the common thread? What do they have in common, right? So what I'm going to do, so the process is you read through each question, read through each choice, and you consider it and you give your judgment, I guess. So what does that look like? The common thread is that people today are increasingly resistant to the regimentation of life. Increasingly resistant to the regimentation. So regimentation, what I'm linking regimentation to is the uniformity to everything, right? So I'm like, immediately I'm like, okay, so this is linking to the main idea, but increasingly resistant, that doesn't seem to be correct, because it directly contradicts with what he said in fast food about the slaves to, or the autonomy thing. And notice how I can't remember the exact phrase, but I have a feeling of what he was talking about. Here it is. Surrendering their autonomy to machines. Again, this is where I'm saying the tone is more important than the actual passage. What I was able to remember was the author thinks people are like slaves to the machines, right? So would he say that they're increasingly resistant to like the stuff? No. So right away, I'm saying A can't be correct. No way, no how. 2, expect their needs to be met at the lowest possible cost. Expect their needs to be met at the lowest possible cost. I do remember something about cost for like the burgers, maybe something about about like the food. He said something about like the wholesome food or whatever. Prefer the fastest means of getting from a hunger state to a status run without surprise at a low cost. Right here, boom. So I recall this little thing. Christina makes an excellent point, but nothing for the housing. Again, yes, that is correct. When we see if it's not supported in the passage, you cannot assume it. If it's not supported, you're going to make a lot of assumptions. You're going to make assumptions about the author, you're going to make blah, blah, but they're all going to be educated, well-founded assumptions. If it has nothing to stand on, you cannot assume it. So because there is nothing about the cost of the housing stuff, right? And when we're going back and doing this, we're just skimming. We're skimming and looking for it. And don't feel afraid that like, oh, I might miss it. If it's there in like a noticeable way that it's like a major point of the thing. So it's like application, identical structures, people can walk in and like be confused. They look similar, uniformity, and then some random stuff about Steven Spielberg. So then we're just like, nothing here talked about money. So it's like, it's like Christina said, nothing for the housing. Then B is out, okay? C, allow themselves to be treated as interchangeable. Okay, here's the thing. I don't remember if they said, I know that they said that the houses are interchangeable. And I know that they said that the, so the houses, so here's the thing. So in the fast food part, it does allude to this, right? Because you said something about turnover. Something over here. Yeah, turnover among workers in fast food franchises, right? Business highest turnover rate, etc. Right? And they all do simple, repetitive work. So if that's the case, then the people are interchangeable in that environment, right? Are they interchangeable in the housing environment? Well, let's take a look. With such uniformity, suburbanites may well enter the wrong subdivision or become lost in their own. If they can randomly walk into another house and not even recognize their house, that is alluding to the interchangeability of the people in these environments, right? And so that we can look at as a common thread. So right now, I feel like this is a good answer, but this is the 50-50, right? Because we knew that A and B are definitely wrong. So we have to discern between C and D. D, are unable to discriminate among products that differ in quality. Unable to discriminate sounds good. This sounds good because, we're talking about uniformity. We're talking about, things that that aren't unique, right? So this makes sense. Among products that differ, okay, in quality. It was a good choice right until the end because this does not flow with the main idea. The main idea is not about quality. It is about the uniformization. I don't even know what the word is. The uniformication? The uniforming of society or whatever, right? It's not about quality. So this is a very typical trap answer where it sounds all good and then literally at the last word they hit you with the flaw. It's a trap. These are traps. And the more that you do this, the more that you'll be able to recognize like, oh, wow, this sounds great. I can't wait for it to be completely wrong at the end. Like that's the point that you'll eventually get to. And so this is the key here. So let me do a little bit of drawing. So you understood how I immediately got A, how I immediately eliminated A because resistant doesn't flow with the main idea at all. They're weaker. They're subservient to the machines, right? Needs to be met at the lowest possible cost. Yes, this was present in the first one, but not in the second one. It was present with the fast food, but it was not present. There was no evidence for this with the housing. 3, so far so good. There's nothing super, like we have the 2 examples of, but they could be like, it's not the greatest way to phrase this, right? It's definitely not like the best way that you could come up with this idea. So then we move on to D, and this sounds good. Unable to discriminate among products. Yeah, exactly. Like, because that's exactly what the people switching the houses are doing, right? They can't tell the different houses apart. But is it based on quality? No, it's not because of quality. It's because of everything becoming uniform. So that is the process. The process is get rid of the two ones that are very easy to contradict, and then get rid of the third one that is the trap, that is trying to bait you. It wants you to pick it. It's like, look at me, I'm such a good answer choice, but it's not, because you always link back to what is the main idea. That's what's going to center you. That's what's going to keep you from getting lost, because we know that the main idea is I would put it as simple as like the author doesn't like how uniform society is becoming. Like something super simple, super basic, like that just makes sense to you. As long as it's supported by the main idea, you're good. And the more simple it is, the more easy it will be for you to get rid of things that clearly that contradict it, because this has nothing to do with quality. So it's like, okay, then you're out. So C should be the correct answer. Yes. Okay. So let's look at their explanation for D and C. Right. Right here. There is no discussion of whether people can discriminate quality. There isn't. You might feel like there is. You might want there. You might think like, well, if everything becomes uniform, then there's no quality. That makes sense, but it's not what the author said. That is that. So that's key. And then what did they talk about here? Autonomy to machines, rules and procedures. Oh, see, I missed this. I missed there was more evidence. They're saying to work in jobs where they are not allowed to think or to respond creatively to the demands of the work. That's more evidence that feeds into their idea, right? So, but the good thing is that like once you have a main idea that works, like the one that I wrote in blue, so you can't see it now. Once you have a main idea like this, it's okay if you don't have every piece of evidence, because you already synthesized a good idea, a good main idea, enough to carry you through that mental check of like, does this make sense or does it not make sense? Yeah. Any questions on that whole process or anything I need to explain? Please feel free.
Yeah. So it was great that you went through it. By the way, I think that really helped, and I think people that see the recording are gonna really like it too.
Awesome.
So I see how you did the 50-50.
Mhm.
I can't break out of like the 75 for some reason. So I was kind of like 25 for B, 25 for D, and then 50 for C. But I was kind of between B and C. Simply because like where it says different quality was okay, it's almost there, but that one word messed it up.
Mhm.
But then the part that you underlined in D, I was like, that's kind of there, but not really. Like and then like C, I was like, I agree with it, but I don't know if the rest of it is as strong as B. So in the case of like, let's say with B, like we definitely can't verify the low possible cost in terms of the houses. Should we just completely X it out and go with the one that we can't contradict? Because I couldn't find a contradiction for C, but I didn't feel so strongly for it.
Great. What you're vocalizing is very, very important, because that is the majority of these correct answers. You can't find a contradiction, but you don't feel like it's strongly correct. They're not going to make the right answer strongly correct. Think about that.
Yeah.
Like they don't want you to find it, right? They want it to be difficult to find. So it's very rare that it jumps out to you as like, oh, this is clearly correct. The jump out choices are always going to be the ones that are flawed, and they are the bait choices, right? So if you're feeling like, oh, this is obviously correct, that's a moment of like, hold on, I need to check myself. I need to make sure if this flows and everything is correct. To address what you're saying about, so you were saying about B, that you see why it makes sense for fast food, but you don't see why it makes sense for suburban housing. Oh, no, you said that we don't
Yeah.
have evidence for suburban housing, and you're saying, is that
Yeah.
enough to get rid of it? Right? That's your question?
Yeah, because I was thinking like for B, I was thinking like, it's kind of close enough because they said it about food. So
Mhm.
I feel like the lowest possible is clearly expressed in food. So I was like, yeah, I feel strongly about it, but I was like, but it wasn't expressed for housing, so I don't know. So part of it is definitely like not justified, but I still do feel strongly about it. I didn't feel strongly about C. So okay, yeah, I think what you said already helped me understand it.
So I think that's definitely, you're definitely working through some good ideas here. The lowest possible cost is justified in fast food and is not justified in suburban housing, right?
Yeah.
The question is saying a common thread. That means you need to justify both.
Ah, good point.
You must, it's not enough for one to be justified. It's the same, you can kind of see it in the same way as like are increasingly resistant to the regimentation of life, but it's in two different, okay. Oh, I really want to explain this, but how do I explain this? Um, this is gonna be a little bit abstract.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, okay, so I think I might need to draw it out. So if I, this is like, okay, this is like logical, like logic nonsense. Increasingly resistant is a positive contradiction. I'm using the word positive here in the sense that it exists. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's a
Yes.
positive contradiction because it's something that you can falsify. But
Mhm.
but here, the lowest possible cost with suburban housing is a negative contradiction because it doesn't exist.
Uh-huh.
I can tell that that doesn't really make sense, and I'm trying to figure out a better way to explain it. The easiest kind of contradict, if I say, okay, let me think through an example that actually makes sense. Let me like write out an example so I can explain it to you well. Mm,
I do kind of get it that because one of them can be proved, then one of them can't be proven.
yeah, I think you do get it. I think I just want to give you a very clear example so that you can always like rely on it and it won't be like
Okay.
kind of get it. So you can like really like understand because remember,
Yeah, and
this is
I
the
appreciate.
critical reasoning. Like this is all about logic and like working through, and we don't do this like every day. We just don't. A lot of people don't have practices, and that's not, you didn't do anything wrong. It's society's fault that never taught us to do any of this. So um uh yeah, yeah, so let me give you a good example. Hmm, okay, I think I have something that kind of makes sense. If I
Okay.
took, okay, so we all know that the sky is blue, right? If I
Mhm.
said the sky is red, how would you disprove it?
Huh. I would say the sky cannot be red because the sky is blue. Hmm.
No, that's correct, right? It's a clear contradiction, right? Because
Okay.
it is one way, and I'm saying it's something else. So that's the example with increasingly resistant, because they're not increasingly resistant. We have clear evidence that it's actually the opposite, right?
Mhm.
So that is what I mean by a positive contradiction. A contradiction because I'm putting out something wrong. I have put out something that is wrong. My position is
see.
wrong. Increasingly resistant. That position is wrong. It's out there and it's incorrect. Now,
Copy.
now what if I had said the sky isn't blue? How would you contradict that?
Damn. All I can see is the sky is blue. But
All you can say is the sky is blue, right?
yeah.
So that, but I'm coming from a different angle now, right?
Mhm.
I'm not putting forward a proposition. I'm not putting forward a fact. I'm just saying your fact is wrong in a way. So that's kind of what I mean by like a negative contradiction, in that there is no evidence for my argument. There is no evidence that suburban housing wants the lowest possible cost. And because that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Here's the thing, and that's why it's even worse. That's why this is more tricky. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It could be that suburban housing costs less, and that's why they want it, but it's not supported. That's the extra rub. Because it's not supported, we can't go with it.
Copy.
So I'm just gonna write it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I'm gonna write it out in chat so a little like it can make a little bit more sense. So a positive contradiction is something. This is like a logic. This is a logic based example that I'm working through. A positive contradiction is when the answer choice has something that blatantly contradicts the passage, right? And this is easy to find. This is easy to understand because it's just wrong. Like you can just see that it's wrong. But the opposite, seeing something is wrong and versus seeing that there isn't, okay, I have to say it correctly. Sorry, hold on. Negative contradiction. The answer choice has something that isn't contradicted, but also isn't supported. Negative contradiction. The answer choice has something that isn't contradicted, but also isn't supported by the passage. For our purposes, for the purpose of this exam, if it's not supported, it's wrong.
Copy. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that was a great question. I think because that's a great question because you're really thinking through like, how do we say that part is wrong? And the thing is, the logical process to arrive at why that's wrong is totally different, right? Because you're not contradicting this time. You're seeing that there isn't anything. There's no contradictions, but there's no evidence. So this is wrong, but in a different way, through a different line of logic.
Yeah, that actually makes it make way more sense. Yeah, hopefully I can get it down to the 50-50 because
Yeah.
the 75 split is no good.
Yeah, you don't want to be juggling with three different ones. Thank you so much for answering that question. See, that's exactly what I want with the very basic, like, because it's hard to explain. The thing is, like, those little things are like, if you actually sit down to explain them, they can like balloon into like a whole explanation, and there's a lot to actually dig into for very simple stuff like that. So yeah, anybody else I can move on to the next question, or anybody can jump in if they have anything to say. Okay, then we will move on to the next one. Let me clear this off. I think we are actually running low on time, not in a bad way. Like we spent all our time like really well today. So I think I'll just work on this to answer it. And hopefully that will help. Okay, so sorry, I just need to move like the chat boxes. Okay. Information in the passage suggests that a rationalized travel agency would emphasize planned tours to popular attractions with accommodations at large hotels. I can't really, these are, okay, I think this is a reasoning beyond the text because they're giving us like new information that isn't in here, right? So when it comes to reasoning beyond, since it's all new information, you want to read through them before you start making any kind of judgments. So let's go through this. Plan tours to popular attractions with accommodations at large hotels. Computerized systems to provide low-cost customized itineraries. Personnel trained to make reservations but with little experience as travelers. Procedures that encourage problem-solving initiatives by managers. Okay, so what I want to do, so right away, D sticks out to me as wrong because procedures that encourage problem-solving initiatives by managers, I feel like I remember reading something about how they don't want creative ideas from workers. These minimal skills also irrational from the perspective of employees who are not allowed to think or respond creatively, right? So right away, I'm not on D train. I don't think D is good. So D, I'm going to cross out D based on that. They are not encouraging problem solving initiatives. And again, notice how I deleted this based on the word encourage, right? Because I'm going with what the author feels about the whole situation. Personnel trained to make reservations but with little experience as travelers. I think this could be okay because they said something about fast food workers not really having experience. Few skills are required on the job, so workers are asked to only use a minute portion of their abilities. This policy is irrational from the standpoint of the organization since it could obtain much more from its employees. Minimal skills also irrational from the perspective of employees. Personnel trained to make reservations but with little experience as travelers. Okay. So this is this is tricky. I think that this is I don't think that this is, I think that this is a slight bait because they want you to think that experience as travelers is related here. But I don't think it is because if we matched the metaphor, right? In this situation, the personnel, the rationalized personnel can make reservations but cannot travel. What would the equivalent of that be for like a fast food McDonald's employer? Somebody who can make burgers, but he can't eat them. But they never talked about that. They never said anything about like, do the workers themselves like enjoy the fruit of their labor or anything like that. So I think for that second part, I think that C is not right about this. I think that this is off the mark with little experience as travelers. I don't think they were talking about that. I'm not sure. No, I don't think they were talking about that. B, computerized systems to provide low-cost customized itineraries. Versus A, plan tours to popular attractions with accommodation at large hotels. Okay, I am going to, oh man, I wanted to make a poll, but I don't know how to make a poll. Shoot.
We could just put it in the chat at the same time.
We could just put it in the chat. Yeah, we could just put it in the chat, but I wanted to make it like an anonymous poll in case anybody didn't want to. Sorry, I don't know how to make a poll. Okay, whatever. You guys can direct message me your choice if you want, or you can post it publicly. It's up to you. Or you can just not post anything. That's also okay. Please go ahead and choose between A and B. Oh wow, it's universal for B. Okay, that's pretty awesome. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm pretty sure that B is wrong. I'm pretty sure that B is wrong, and it's the same bait. What choice, what what is the bait here? What's the problem here? There's one flaw. Is it computerized? No, because they talked about computerized and customized. Yes, that's the flaw. Remember, at the end of every choice, does it flow with the main idea? That's going to be your mantra. You're going to start chanting that. You're going to be in your sleep. You're going to be whispering it to yourself. You see how they get you? Oh, I'm so glad that we did this because you get to see it. And this is exactly the kind of like the brain activation you're going to get when you do it yourself. And you're like, oh my God, how could I have fallen for that? Right. And the more that you fall for it, the less you'll fall for it. That's why it's so good. Customized means no uniformity. Exactly. Just one word will screw you. Will screw your choice. It's just wrong. It's just wrong now because customized doesn't mean uniform. It just doesn't mean that. And we all agreed that the main idea of the passage was the author doesn't like that society is becoming more uniform. Customization is exactly the opposite of uniform. And it's crazy. Like cars will have you thinking like, this sounds so good. Computerized systems, low cost. These are all the things that he's talking about, except for customized, except for that. So again, this sounds like ass. This is terrible. Like nobody would ever like write this, but unfortunately, it's the best choice because there's nothing wrong with it. And it's like the middle child. It's like nobody cares about him, but it's like, all right, fine, I guess. Cars. This is why people hate this section. But I think that the abandoned child, yes, I think that yes. So you can see that customized is not it, and it actually could be C, but I think that this is again. So again, notice the difference between positive and negative contradictions. Andrew, what's the positive and negative contradiction here? Do you see it?
Give me a second. Give me a second.
Sure.
I want to say, damn, I want to say B has the positive and C has the negative.
You know what?
Can you say again?
You know what?
Yeah.
You're right on the money.
Yeah, yes, sir.
That's exactly right. Customized is a positive contradiction because it directly contradicts with uniform.
Yeah.
Little experience as travelers is a negative contradiction because there's no evidence for it. And in case you forgot what I was saying, it's because they don't mention anything about the fast food workers not having experience with eating burgers, because that is what this is an analogy for, if that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, please let me know and I'll explain it further. But that's what I'm getting at. So yeah, unfortunately, we arrive at this crappy that nobody would pick this answer in the beginning. Even when I read this first, I was like, I don't know what this means. I'm just moving past it. But I guess like large hotels kind of matches like the suburban housing and like, I don't know. This is the only, I actually, if you ask me to explain why this is correct, I would actually have a hard time. But I know that it's the only one that doesn't have anything straight up wrong with it. So that's cars for you. Yep. So yeah. So let's see their reason for why. And a lot of people were in the same boat, thought B was correct. I think they will say the same thing about customization for B. Yeah, use of customized itineraries implies the opposite of the rational model because it offers individual variation. That's it. And when you read that, you just feel dumb. You're just like, oh, duh, because that's what it does. I wonder what their argument is for A. The passage describes that industries using a rational model attempt to provide a large number of consumers with standard set of experiences. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess, but like nobody would really. I don't know. That sure, whatever. That's why I don't like it doesn't make sense. The elimination route is the only one that like works for me really well, because it's very hard to like explain, at least for me. I'm sure there are people out there who are like, oh yeah, A is obviously the correct answer because XYZ. For me, I'm just like, this is the one that's the least wrong. It's okay. That's where I'm at. Polish cat. What did they say? 46? I don't know, maybe. Maybe. But yeah, I think this was a really great question. Oh, it's 7 o'clock. Shoot. Well, this is 3 or 4. Do you guys want to do the last one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, if you have to go, you can go, no worries. But we'll do the last one. Suppose the employee responses to work. Oh, actually, I just want to check. Was the last one reasoning beyond the text? I think it was. You have to go get a good MCAT score. Go. You're missing your exam day. You gotta go. Is this reasoning beyond the text? Yeah, it is reasoning beyond the text. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I was just checking for myself, but I'm saying like if you had like, let's say, actually you can track this. You can start like writing a journal and whatever, and like, you know, if you had gotten this wrong, you would have written down like, you know, I got this many reasoning beyond the text wrong, this many comprehension wrong, et cetera, and that will like give you a little bit more focus on what to improve on. Okay. Okay, let's just do this. Suppose that the employee responses to working conditions in fast food franchises, paragraph 4. So sometimes they'll just tell you straight up like what paragraph to focus on. And that means that you're really, I think, this just like slightly bothered me because I remember a passage where they said this, and then I think I had picked up something from paragraph 5 and used that instead, and it was wrong because of that reason. So ever since then, I'm like, I religiously just follow whatever paragraph they tell me. Like use the paragraph and use your general main idea in your head, but don't use specific information from any other paragraph. As far as I know, because I got something wrong one time, and so it just bothered me since then. So let's go to paragraph 4. Okay, so these restrictions lead to high levels of resentment, job dissatisfaction, alienation, absenteeism, and turnover among workers in fast food franchises. In fact, these businesses have the highest turnover rate of any industry in the US. The entire workforce of the fast food industry turns over 3 times in a year. Wow, that's crazy. Although the simple, repetitive nature of the work makes it easy to replace those who leave, the organization would clearly benefit from keeping employees longer. The costs of hiring and training are magnified when the turnover rate is extraordinarily high. So when I have one of these paragraph questions, I just go over and I just skim it quickly, you know, just to refresh myself and make sure that I'm not including make sure that I'm focusing on the paragraph in question. Okay, so now, in light of this information, the author's main point in mentioning these responses is, so since we have a suppose, this is like a reasoning. This might be reasoning beyond because they're giving us some new information. Suppose that the employee response to working conditions in fast food also applies to entry-level assembly line workers. This is definitely reasoning beyond because we're now talking about assembly line workers, which is not part of this passage. In light of this information, the author's main point in mentioning these responses is reasoning beyond allows you to input some of your reasoning beyond is the only time where you're thinking for yourself in a way, like you're using your understanding of the thing, in this case assembly line workers. Like you have to know what assembly line workers are because they didn't talk about it, right? But your understanding of assembly, it's not your understanding, it's what would the author think about assembly line workers, right? The author's main point in mentioning these responses is weakened versus strengthened. So right away we have to make a decision. Is it weakened or is it strengthened? Even before I read the rest of this crap, I'm just going to think about, well, would it be weakened or strengthened? The employee responses to working conditions in fast food franchises. What are the employee responses? High turnover, because it's easy to replace them. Simple, repetitive nature of work. Does this stuff apply to assembly line workers? Immediately, I'm thinking in my head, yes. I'm thinking, yes, These are flowing together. These are both similar. So the author's main point of mentioning these responses, I feel, would be strengthened because this would give him extra evidence. This would give him extra support. He said, well, look, this is the case for fast food workers. So my point is that, uniformity in society sucks. Well, if somebody came to him and was like, Professor, look, I found that the same thing is true for assembly line workers. Would he be happy or sad about that? He would be happy because it furthers his agenda. It makes his point make more sense. Look, I knew it. I was right. Uniformity makes people unhappy or whatever, right? So strengthened. That's where this is how I've eliminated half of the choices. I'm going with strengthened based off of that. But now why is it strengthened? Since predictability and employee turnover are associated in another context, or since low wages and job dissatisfaction are associated in another context. Between C and D, you guys pick. This time, it's not a bait like last time. It's it's not a bait like last time, Christina. Don't worry. I think it is C because this kind of flows with the unexpectedly, like it flows exactly with what I was saying about the predictability and employee turnover. And remember, again, they said, hey, look at paragraph 4, right? And so if you look at paragraph 4, 1, 2, 3. I don't think anything is mentioned about wages in paragraph 4. I think, check this out. It could obtain much more from its employee for the money, however negligible it pays them, right? That's in paragraph 3, straight up. So that just gives you an extra oomph to like be like, oh, it's definitely not D. It should be C. So let's see. Yay! So it's C. And we can see that D, the author does not discuss low wages as source of dissatisfaction. He doesn't, and it's also not in that paragraph. So yeah. Oh, I got it wrong because I didn't select C. Okay. So yeah, guys, that was the car session. I hope that helped. How did you guys feel coming into it, and how do you guys feel coming out of it?
I feel way better coming out of it. Like I felt like really like shaky and like I don't know what I'm doing at all going into it. And I'm just gonna like as I told you the 70, I don't have the 50-50, I have the 75.
Gotcha.
But now I feel like I have more tools to get to that 50-50, definitely.
Awesome. I love to hear that. Yes, tools in your toolbox. That's great. Yeah, hard time staying away for cars. Yeah, it's tough. The thing somebody else was also saying that, and I was saying you have to kind of mentally click in. And you have to find some kind of trick to like mentally click in. For me, my trick was like I pretended that I was like an FBI agent, right? And that this passage is like the only piece of evidence I have that the killer left behind. And I viewed like the author as like my enemy. And I was like, I need to stay awake and I need to read and I need to figure out who the author is so I can catch him. Otherwise, like people will die or something. Like you have to, whatever like crazy like scenario you have to make for your brain. You gotta, yeah, it's tough to stay awake for cars. I do agree with that. I don't know. I think some of it you'll get over it with practice. Just making a daily habit could help a lot. Yeah. Okie dokes. Yeah, so that's it for today. Let me figure out how to close all this. Stop sharing. How do I stop recording? Does anybody know how? Oh, it's over here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see it. I got it. Okay, thank you. If anybody's listening to this, thanks for listening. Bye.